This video is to assist you installing the PV3 lock kit. You want to familiarize yourself with the entire video before you attempt an installation. First thing you want to do is align the doors in the container. So you've selected the container and you've placed it on as level a surface as you can. Then you want to use the bottle jack to jack it up wherever need be to get the doors aligned. You don't want to use the rubber seal as an alignment guide. You want to pick something out on the container like a weld on each door that is likely exactly the same if you align them. You also double check from the inside the door edge to the header and to the threshold, give you a general idea that you're well aligned. There's the same distances between the two. Next, you'll want to remove the cam rods. So you want to get the cam rods off, the handle keepers off, only on the right side door. Obviously, only on the right side door now. Don't forget. So you want to zip them off from the outside, and the adhesive sealant on the inside that holds those bolts in place will probably hold the nut in place. But here you see one that's spinning, so you'll have to either have someone secure that with a vice grip if it spins, or put a vice grip on it if you're by yourself and secure it so it doesn't spin, and you can zip them off from the outside. You'll know which one is the security bolt. There's generally 2 or 3. You'll have to grind them off, I suggest from the outside or the inside, it doesn't matter, to get those rods off. Next, you'll want to replace the bolts in the open holes. You can use new bolts if you want. They're fairly inexpensive. Next, you want to remove the factory lock box. So we're drawing a line here showing you where you want to run your grinder. You don't want to go willy-nilly on this, or you'll cut holes in the door. So you grind around the top. We'll show you where on this line, and then obviously go through that opening so you don't have to grind that area right there. So you'll grind the box to where the box will come off, and then there'll be a plate underneath that you also have to grind out, and I'll show you how that goes. So this is the type of blade you want to use. We'll show this and other types of cutting blades. It's a thin wheel. You got to be careful with this. Make sure you're using the guard on these, and then you'll take a 4-inch grinder. You can also use a 6-inch grinder or 7-inch grinder. Sometimes they're a little easier to deal with if you have them. So follow the line that we showed you to draw and cut through to remove that box, and we'll show you here what that looks like when it's all done, and then what the next step is. Be sure to use all your safety gear. Now, goggles, face shield, gloves, long sleeves. You don't want to get any of this hot stuff on you. It'll burn. And so after you've done it right, it really just pops off. Next, you want to use a flap wheel grinder. It looks like this, and we'll show you where you're using that. You want to get this tab off. That's the inside of the box, and you want to grind down with the flap wheel those edges rather than just cutting them, because you'll cut into the door. So you want to weld away, or grind away, or flap wheel away that weld. And so here's a view of that all the way around, and what you're trying to do is remove the weld so that the plate just falls off, and it generally won't just fall off. You're going to have to bang it off, and we'll show you that here shortly. The whole process for this box took about 35-40 minutes. So there you saw him popping that tab off, and now you're going to use the flap wheel to grind it down smooth onto the edge of the door. Then you want to go to the other side and get that one off too. Same process. And then you're left with some raw steel. You want to prime that with an etching primer. So if you have an overnight, you will get surface rust, but that's the best way to go there. Next, you want to attach the drill guide. Here in this case, they put the bit sizes that they're going to drill on the guide so they don't get confused. Here's where you want to attach it. There's an adjustable range, 24 inches from the center, generally a little bit below center is a good place to put it. You want to get it right at the door edge, and that door edge direction is actually on the drill guide. So you want to attach it with 2 Tech screws. Make sure it's plumb. And here you'll see they got it just about a 1/8 inch, maybe as much as a 1/4 inch off the edge. Here's the bit that you'll want to use for the holes for the bolts. It's a 3/8, and my Mastercar has it, but you can find good bits a lot of places. But you want to make sure you get a good high-speed drill bit. These smaller holes you can get through in, gosh, less than a minute, 30 seconds or so. You've got 2 layers of steel to go through. They get through pretty easy with a good bit. And you want to go slow, and you use a little bit of fluid you saw me using there. Here for the bigger hole, 33/64 they use. You can also use a 1/2 inch. We'll be routing it out later. So slower is better when you're drilling steel. You'll get a sense. Well, you'll see the chips coming flying out. And once again, you want to use the fluid. That'll save the bit. So take your time. You'll get through it. This hole took maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes to get all the way through, which is a little long for a good bit, but I think they've been using this bit for a while. So you see them coming out and spraying in the fluid there. Here, in this case, he got to a point, he said he wanted to finish off with a pilot hole. Sometimes that'll get you in a little faster. So he finished it off with a pilot hole, and then he comes back with the right size bit, the 33/64, the 1/2 inch, to get it all the way through. Once again, this whole process for this bigger hole, maybe as much as 2 minutes to get through. Slow with pressure. Now he's through and he's reaming it out. So remove the drill guide. Now you want to ream these holes out a little bit with a step bit. Doesn't have to be an expensive step bit. They don't take too much work. We're only going up 1 step just to route that those inner holes out a little bit. Makes it easier to install the lockbox when you're putting it on. This is not mandatory, but once again, it will make it much easier to get the bolts in through the door into the lockbox. So you'll go up 1 step. So we already have the sizes, so you know what you need to do as far as going up 1 step. Now you want to install the inner base plate. Make sure you have this orientation correct. So you can secure it back in the same holes that you drilled for the drill guide, with the same screws for that matter. So just secure it on, and then make sure you can visualize to get through the holes there. They're all lined up, ready to go, ready to install the box. Okay, so here he's installing the lock box, the outer lock box, feeding the bolts through, the hex head bolts through to get in that box, and it's pretty evident how to do that. You want to go finger tight only. Next you want to install the shaft with the thick bushing, so you'll freeze this and take a look at it so you understand. It's the shaft with the bushing on the shaft before you install it. You can see there. And you feed it through that hole. In this case, he's having a little struggle, and part of that struggle is the holes are a little tight. So what he'll do is loosen up those the anchor bolts that he had on there. The other bolts are on finger tight, so after that he can slide it through and wiggle it in and get it into the slot, the matching slot on the lockbox. Then he tightens those anchor screws back in. Now that the shaft's in, you want to make sure it freewheels, it's not in a jam, since you've tightened that box back up, that plate back onto the box. And you want to get the handle. It's self-evident how it installs. You're going to slide it up inside the box and slide the shaft out and slide the shaft into that handle. Then you want to orient the handle down and make sure the shaft plate's also that edge of the hole, the shaft plate's down, so that you can get the small hex bolt shown here with a long hex tool to slide it in and get it into the opening in the handle. Then it slides through the handle, slides through the shaft, and then you finger tight it, and then you'll want to get a vice grip and tighten it just to where you can barely feel that hex tool bending. Don't be afraid to get it tight. We really need that tight there. Then you want to tighten down the bolts on the faceplate. You can spin that shaft around to get to them. Next, you want to install this thin bushing here, and the inside handle slides then over the thin bushing, and then another thin bushing, and they all go onto that last piece of the shaft that's on the other side of the shaft plate from the interior, shown there with the green arrow. They all slide on. It's fairly simple, pretty self-evident when you're putting it on. Take note of the handle orientation. You see it bends out, not in. You don't want it on backwards. There's a view of all the pieces: the thick bushing, the plate, the thin bushing, the handle, and another thin bushing. Next, you'll put the faceplate over the top of that. You use these 3 spacers and the bolts that hold them in. All these parts will be pretty evident what they are, and we'll show in some hard copy all the pieces. So you want to get that all together, snug it up tight, and then test the handle. We want the handle snug, but if it's too tight, you might want to put a fender washer with the spacers to make it smooth. And then install the index plunger. That's the interior escape piece. You'll see it pops into that faceplate. Next, we want to install some rod guides. So there's a picture of the rod guide. You want to level at the bottom of the door, center of the door style there. Putting them on with Tek screws, same with the top. After you watch this, it'll become more evident what you need to do here. And the next process is to cut off the rubber seals of the right side door. Only the right side door. Be safe with a razor knife. Cut along the edge of the batten that holds that inner seal on. And once again, just the inner edge. It'll be evident here as we remove them. Just the inner edge of the rubber seal on only the right side door. Be careful, always cut away from yourself. Careful with your blade. Remove that rubber seal. The top, the bottom, and the door edge. You don't have to do the hinge side. Next, you'll want to install the striker block. You can freeze this screen to get the measurements. And the key to this is you want to get it in a position where when that striker handle is down on the block, that is in the lower 1/3 of the block, so that you can create a gradual slide for the handle and the striker to pull the door shut right about there in that lower third. You don't want to interfere with any of the screws that hold the block on, but generally it's not in position to do that. So you get that on, and then you'll test the door, and you'll find that it's set up to adjust it by grinding it with the flap wheel to get it smooth to where it'll close. So try it a different few times. You can always take more off. So here he's taking a little bit off, and it's tight. He can pull the door with his hand to get it shut, but that's not going to do. You're going to have to do a little more, adjust it, and then keep trying it little by little until you see, okay, that's pretty smooth. And here the handle itself is scraping away a little bit of the block. You can see the black plastic there. So you get it to where it's smooth, but it's snug. Alright, so with the door closed, so next with the door closed, you want to get a pencil or a marker and go through the rod guides and mark where you're going to drill holes for those rods. We're not going to drill them yet, but you want to get that done now because later it'll be too hard to do. So you mark the hole and punch it with a punch so that it's there for drilling later. Next, you'll locate the small link rods. Now these will have one clevis pin already welded in one end, and you'll locate the other clevis pin and the 4 E-clips to install this. So you'll want to freeze this pane and take a long look at how they install onto the inside handle. The inside handle is already in the mechanism, but here it shows where they attach onto that handle, and you'll put the welded end into the handle and install the E-clip. And then the other E-clips and clevis pins that are loose will go to the outer end. I sent an E-clip tool to every branch, but if you don't have one, you want to get it on Amazon. Come in a couple of days, fairly inexpensive, and it's an easy tool. It makes it easy to install the E-clip. You see he's put the lower small link in place on the handle and install the E-clip there. You see how easy it is with the tool. And then the same on the upper. You want to orient the handle. Here is handle down to access that hole that it goes into. On the lower one, the handle has to be up to access it, as you can see there. And you install those, and then next you're going to trim the long locking rods. So with the handle in the up position, you're going to put one of the locking rods, they're both identical. You place one of the locking rods down fully into the rod guide to position it to trim it. So here you want to take a close look what you're trying to do here. You want the long rod to overlap the small linkage, and you want to cut about 1 inch up. And then ultimately you'll be rounding those edges and smoothing those edges. I'm going to show the whole process here. We'll take you through it, so there's no need to try to get it all down now, but I just want you to understand the whole process. So the long rod overlaps the short linkage. You're going to cut 1 inch up. We'll round those edges after you cut, and then you'll mark for the clevis that goes through both the linkage and the long rod. So here he is going through that process. He's got the lower one in all the way to the rod guide, and he's lining it up and laying it up against the short linkage, and he's marking the 1 inch up, and he will ultimately be cutting that. Then you're going to do the upper one. Make sure you don't do it above, you do it below because you're overlapping here. So cut 1 inch down, so you slide it all the way up into that upper rod guide and lay it up against the linkage, short linkage, and mark 1 inch, and then you're going to cut them and you're going to round the edges. Just your thin cutting blade works well on these. You round those edges, get them smooth so there's no chance of anybody scraping themselves on a sharp edge. Then you're going to take them and lay them in place fully into the rod. He's got that lower one in place, and he's going to work on the top one first because he can push it up and hold it and mark for where he's going to drill the hole for the clevis to go through both of them. So he's marked both holes, and then he's going to take them to the bench, anchor them down. He's going to use a 2164 bit. You can also use a 5/16. There's the master car that you can order, or you can buy them anywhere. Good high-speed metal bit. So the next stage is to take those cut rods, go inside the container, close the container doors, latch it tight with the strike handle, and then slide them up into the rod guide and test to make sure that you're in the right position for the mark you made to drill the hole for the rod guide. You want to do it before attaching them with the clevis pins, because otherwise you won't be able to get the door latched all the way. So you want to slide it up into the rod and see if you're on the mark for the marks you made earlier to drill the hole for that rod to go into the header and into the threshold. I will tell you that this is probably the biggest mistake people make. They are a little haphazard with where they're drilling that hole. A small miss here, a very small miss here, is a very large miss later. You want to get dead center on that hole. So if you have to remark it and repunch it before you drill the hole for that rod to go into the header and into the threshold, then do so. Okay, so now's the time to attach the rods with the clevis pins. Slide the pins in from the door to the outside and attach the E-clip. Next, you want to get this rod guide, this plastic rod guide. Pretty obvious what it is. There's two of them, and you want to install them for the long rod to slide 3 inches from the clevis pin on a standard, about 5 inches from it on a high cube. And you want to make sure you do it with the handle down, the inside handle straight down when you're attaching the rod guides. So you'll use the 4 Tech screws per block, and it will go over the long locking rod against the door stile and screw it in with the Tech screws. You'll do it on the lower one as shown here, then the same on the upper one. Get all 4 Tech screws in and get those rod guides in position. Alright, so we're going to finally drill the holes for the rods to go into the threshold and into the header. The paper instructions call for a 1/2 inch bit, but we're going to route it out anyway, so if you got the 3364s, you use that. And there's a picture of that bit again, 3364, also a 1/2 inch. Can be used because we're going to use the step bit to route them out after we drill them anyway. So here you definitely use some lubricating fluid. Earlier they were using WD-40. Now he's using I think it's an oil transmission fluid or something like that, or a drill lubrication is good. So this hole took about a minute and a half to drill. This is probably one of the harder holes to drill, and the one on the header is definitely one of the harder ones to drill because it's overhead. So make sure you're using the goggles and the gloves. Don't want any shavings in your eye. And so this one probably took the longest of all the holes, just because of the position. You'll be on a ladder, so take good care that you're in a stable and safe position on a ladder or stool, whatever you have. Here he's almost through on this hole. He's got it through. He's routing it out or reaming it out. And next he'll take the step bit and route out the threshold hole. You might want to go as much as 2 steps here. The hole, you'd like a little bit of tolerance for that hole in case of any a little bit of racking on the container when customers are trying to use it. This is probably the one place where we'd like to have a little more tolerance. You'll do that for the lower hole. You do the same for the upper hole, probably 2 steps to make it a little bit bigger. And then you'll test the door and make sure that you're in position. Here it looks to be pretty close, a little bit off. In fact, bottom one, it looks dead center. And so you've got it fully operational now. You can test it. You're on the home stretch here, so you test the door, make sure it's smooth opening and smooth operating. You test it from the inside, open, close it, test it from the outside. This gives you a good view of the operation from the inside. This one's operating quite well. You can see where the striker hits that block. Nice gradual pull to the door. Smooth operation of the rods into the holes in the threshold as well as the header. Next, you want to take some denatured alcohol or some product that doesn't leave a residue and clean off the places where we're going to put stickers. So the inside handle gets a sticker and the outside lockbox gets a sticker. So clean them off really good and apply the sticker. Take your time, make sure there's no bubbles, and get it on plumb and straight, nice and level. Center of the box, same with the escape sticker, and we'll show how that escape knob works later. So now you want to put some Gorilla Glue in the cap, and you'll install the cap. Use only Gorilla Glue. We've tried all kinds of glues. This is the one that works the best. Out of 20 that I've tried, this works the best. Now, before you do that, though, you might want to try this optional step. So you put the glue in the cap, take a screwdriver and apply a little bit of Gorilla Glue to the edge of each E-clip. So we've had some E-clips fall off in operation, and it makes it really hard to get into the container. So we've tried this step and it seems to work well. The Gorilla Glue holds on there well. So operate the handle and get to each clevis pin, and just put a dab of Gorilla Glue right on the edge. Not a lot, don't overdo it, just a little bit to come in contact with the pin and the E-clip, and that'll dry in really nice, and we haven't seen any clips falling off since we started doing this. Next, you'll want to spray the alignment lines. So here they have a piece of magnetic sign that they've fashioned into a stencil. You can use any kind of stencil that'll create a line. That's very important for the drivers. Don't skip this step. We want the drivers to be able to make sure the container doors are aligned. Once again, doesn't mean the container is completely level, but just that the doors are aligned. You'll also want to do some final touch-up. Here they've got some paint that matches. Here's a view of the operation of the lock from the inside, and now we're taking it out of level. I'll show you how it operates. When one's installed really well, even this racked, you can see it's really racked. You'll see that the door still operates. So that wouldn't be the case if those holes for the rods weren't in perfect position. So that much racking, if the holes are in perfect position for the rods, there's enough tolerance for that to work. So here's a view with a block lock in place and various positions of locking and unlocking. And here's a view of the extra lock that can be used underneath. Key on this one is its size. Master number 3 works, but the key is that diagonally the bottom of that lock is no more than 44 millimeters, or 1 3/4 inches. So there you have it. There's the installation. Please give it a go. I'm quite certain you can get it done. And finally, if you would like a hard copy of the tools in this video, they can be found here on the share drive.